The scent of bergamot and danger wrapped around her like a second skin the moment she pressed herself against the stranger's chest. But it wasn't until his arms tightened protectively around her that she realized she'd just made either the best or worst mistake of her life. Lily Chen's heart hammered against her ribs as she buried her face against the expensive fabric of the stranger's suit jacket. The familiar cologne of her ex-boyfriend Marcus still lingered in her nostrils from when he'd cornered her outside the downtown coffee shop, his fingers digging into her wrist with that old, terrifying grip. "Please," she whispered against the stranger's chest, her voice barely audible over the bustling Seattle street noise. "Just, please go along with this." Strong arms circled her waist, pulling her closer with a confidence that should have terrified her, but somehow didn't. "Easy, sweetheart." A deep voice rumbled above her head, vibrating through his chest. "I've got you." The endearment sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. She risked a glance over her shoulder and saw Marcus standing frozen on the sidewalk, his face twisted with the familiar rage she knew too well. But for once, he wasn't advancing. He was retreating? "Lily." Marcus's voice cracked like a whip, but there was something different about it now. Uncertain. "Get away from him. Now." The stranger's arms tightened imperceptibly around her. "The lady seems comfortable where she is." His voice was velvet over steel, carrying an authority that made several passers-by instinctively step aside. "I suggest you move along." Lily felt the change in the air, thick and electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Marcus took another step back, his bravado crumbling in a way she'd never seen before. In 3 years of his psychological torture, she'd never seen Marcus back down from anyone. "This isn't over," Marcus snarled, but he was already backing away, melting into the crowd with uncharacteristic haste. Only when Marcus disappeared completely did Lily realize she was trembling. The stranger's hands moved to her shoulders, steadying her as she stepped back to look at him properly for the first time. Golden eyes. That was her first coherent thought. Not brown, not amber, but pure molten gold, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was tall, easily 6'3", with dark hair and sharp features that belonged on magazine covers. Everything about him screamed wealth and power, from his perfectly tailored charcoal suit to the way he carried himself like he owned the world. "Thank you," she managed, suddenly self-conscious about her coffee-stained jeans and oversized sweater. "I'm sorry for. That was really presumptuous of me, but he wouldn't leave me alone and you were just—" "Right place, right time," he said, his golden gaze never leaving her face. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, rubbing absently at her wrist where Marcus had grabbed her. The stranger's eyes tracked the movement, and something dangerous flashed across his features. "He's done this before. It wasn't a question. It's fine. He's my ex, and he has trouble accepting boundaries." The words tasted bitter. 3 years of Marcus's escalating behavior, and she was still making excuses for him. "What's your name?" "Lily," she said automatically, then wondered why she'd answered so readily. Something about those golden eyes made her want to trust him, which was insane given what she'd just escaped from. "Lily." He said her name like he was tasting it, rolling it around on his tongue. "I'm Damon. Just Damon." No last name offered, but the way he said it suggested she should know who he was. She didn't, but she nodded anyway. "Well, Damon, thank you again. I should probably have coffee with me." The words hung between them, and Lily blinked in surprise. "What? Coffee? There's a place around the corner that's much better than this tourist trap." He gestured toward the chain coffee shop where she'd been cornered. "You look like you could use something stronger than whatever sugar water they're serving." She should say no. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that she'd already had enough excitement for one day, that the last thing she needed was to get involved with another man, especially one who radiated danger like expensive cologne. But there was something about the way he'd held her, the way he'd made Marcus retreat without raising his voice, that made her feel safer than she had in years. "I don't really date," she said carefully. "I mean, I just got out of something complicated, and it's coffee, not a marriage proposal." One corner of his mouth quirked up in what might have been amusement. "Although I have to admit, your scent is—" He trailed off, shaking his head with a frown, as if he'd said something he hadn't meant to. "My scent." Lily self-consciously lifted her arm to check if she'd forgotten deodorant. "Nothing. Forget I said that." But his nostrils flared slightly, and his pupils dilated. "Coffee." The smart thing would be to politely decline, thank him again, and disappear into the crowd. The smart thing would be to go home to her tiny apartment, lock the door, and pretend this whole encounter never happened. But looking into those impossible golden eyes, Lily found herself wavering. When was the last time a man had looked at her like she was precious instead of property? When was the last time someone had stepped between her and Marcus without expecting something in return? I really should go, she said, even as part of her wanted to stay. Something flickered across Damon's face, disappointment maybe or frustration. Around them, the busy Seattle street continued its rhythm, but Lily could swear the space between them had gone quiet, charged with an electricity she didn't understand. Another time then, he said finally, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a business card, expensive cardstock with simple black lettering. When you're ready. She took the card automatically, her fingers brushing his. The contact sent a jolt through her system, and from the way his eyes darkened, she wasn't the only one who felt it. Blackwood Industries, she read aloud, then looked up at him with new understanding. She might not follow business news, but even she knew that name. You're just a man who'd like to buy you coffee, he said, but there was something predatory in his smile now, something that made her pulse skip. When you're ready, Lily. The way he said her name again, like a promise or a threat, made her take an involuntary step backward. Whatever this man was, he was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with Marcus's crude intimidation. This was something else entirely, something that called to a part of her she'd never known existed. I have to go, she said, clutching his card like a lifeline. I know. He didn't try to stop her as she backed away, but those golden eyes followed her every movement. But you'll call. It wasn't a question, and the certainty in his voice made her stumble slightly. She turned and fled, pushing through the crowd with her heart racing and his card burning like a brand in her palm. Behind her, Damon Blackwood watched until she disappeared around the corner, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The mate bond that had slammed into him the moment she'd touched him still sang through his veins, demanding he follow, demanding he claim what was his. But she was human, fragile, and already damaged by another man's cruelty. She would need time to trust, time to understand. Time he wasn't sure he had, not when every instinct screamed at him to hunt down the bastard who dared put his hands on what belonged to Damon. His phone buzzed. A text from his beta. Pack meeting in an hour. The Vancouver Wolves are making moves. Damon looked down at the message, then back toward the corner where Lily had disappeared. Politics and territory disputes suddenly seemed like distant concerns. His mate was out there, scared and running, carrying his card but probably too afraid to use it. And somewhere in this city, a dead man walking named Marcus was nursing his wounded pride, likely planning his next move. Damon's canines extended slightly as he smiled. Let him try. The Alpha King had found his mate, and heaven help anyone who tried to come between them, even if she didn't know what she was to him yet. Chapter 2. Lily stared at the email on her laptop screen for the third time in 5 minutes, her coffee growing cold as she tried to process what she was reading. The contract offer was generous, too generous for a simple rebranding project. But it was the company name at the bottom of the message that made her stomach flip. Blackwood Industries. She'd been carrying his business card in her wallet for 2 weeks now, pulling it out at random moments like a talisman she couldn't quite bring herself to use. The expensive cardstock had grown soft around the edges from her nervous handling, but the bold black lettering remained as crisp as the memory of those impossible golden eyes. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Sarah. Please tell me you took that Blackwood contract. Do you know how much exposure that could bring your freelance business? Lily rubbed her temples. Sarah was right, of course. Landing Blackwood Industries as a client could set her up for years. The contract was for a complete visual identity overhaul for one of their subsidiary companies, the kind of high-profile project that could launch her from scraping by as a freelance graphic designer to actually having a waiting list. But working with Blackwood Industries meant working with him. With Damon, the man who'd saved her from Marcus with nothing more than a look. The man whose touch had sent electricity through her system and whose voice still haunted her dreams. The man who'd looked at her like he wanted to devour her whole. Her finger hovered over the reply button. Professional opportunity versus personal complications. Rent money versus emotional safety. Before she could chicken out, she typed, I accept the terms. When can we schedule the initial meeting? She hit send before she could change her mind. The response came back within minutes. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Blackwood Industries, 47th floor. Ask for Mr. Blackwood personally. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs. Of course it would be him. She'd known that intellectually, but seeing it confirmed made her question every decision that had led to this moment. Her apartment buzzer rang, making her jump. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the few friends she had usually texted first. Moving cautiously to the intercom, she pressed the button. "Yes." Static crackled, then a voice that made her blood run cold. "Lily, baby, I know you're up there. We need to talk." "Marcus." She stepped back from the intercom as if it had burned her. He'd been texting her obsessively since the encounter outside the coffee shop, alternating between apologies and accusations, but he'd never shown up at her apartment before. The building had security. He shouldn't even be able to get into the lobby. "I'm not letting you up," she said, proud that her voice came out steady. "You can't avoid me forever. I know about your little boyfriend, Lily. Rich boy thinks he can just waltz in and steal what's mine." The possessive edge in his voice made her skin crawl. "I'm calling the police, Marcus." "With what evidence?" "I'm just a concerned ex-boyfriend checking on the woman I love." She could hear the smile in his voice, that cold satisfaction he got when he thought he was being clever. Before she could respond, the intercom went dead. Lily backed away from the door, her hands shaking as she grabbed her phone. She should call the police, but Marcus was right. What would she tell them? That her ex was standing outside her building asking to talk? They'd barely taken her seriously when she'd tried to report his increasingly aggressive texts. She spent the rest of the evening jumping at every sound, checking the locks on her door repeatedly, and peering through her blinds at the street below. By morning, exhaustion weighed heavy on her shoulders, but there was no sign of Marcus anywhere. Maybe he'd given up. Maybe the encounter with Damon had actually scared him off for good. She almost believed it until she got to her car and found the note tucked under her windshield wiper. "You look beautiful when you sleep." The paper shook in her hands as she read it again, hoping she'd misunderstood. But there was no mistaking Marcus's cramped handwriting, no ignoring the implication that he'd been watching her apartment, watching her. Lily looked around the empty parking garage, suddenly feeling exposed under the harsh fluorescent lights. How long had he been watching? How had he gotten close enough to see her through her bedroom window? She crumpled the note and threw it in her purse, then got in her car with shaking hands. She had a meeting with Damon Blackwood in 3 hours, and she needed to pull herself together. The Blackwood Industries building dominated an entire city block, all gleaming glass and steel reaching toward the Seattle sky. Lily had walked past it countless times, but she'd never imagined herself inside it, riding the elevator to the top floor with a portfolio tucked under her arm and her heart in her throat. The receptionist on the 47th floor looked like she belonged on a runway rather than behind a desk. "Ms. Chen? Mr. Blackwood is waiting for you in his office." She was led down a hallway lined with contemporary art that probably cost more than Lily's annual income, past offices with floor-to-ceiling windows offering stunning views of Elliott Bay. At the end of the hall, massive double doors opened into what could only be described as a corner office on steroids. And there he was. Damon stood with his back to her, looking out at the city sprawl below, and for a moment Lily allowed herself to simply look at him. He'd traded his suit jacket for rolled-up shirt sleeves that revealed forearms corded with lean muscle, and even from behind, everything about his posture screamed controlled power. "Lily!" He turned, and those golden eyes found her instantly, tracking over her in a way that made her feel like prey. "Thank you for coming." Professional, she reminded herself. This was a business meeting, nothing more. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Blackwood." She was proud of how composed she sounded. "Your email mentioned a subsidiary company rebrand? Sit." He gestured to a seating area that looked more suited to entertaining foreign dignitaries than discussing design concepts. "Coffee? You look like you could use it." Did she look that tired? Lily touched her face self-consciously. She'd spent extra time with concealer this morning, trying to hide the dark circles under her eyes. Coffee would be great. Damon pressed a button on his desk, and within minutes his assistant appeared with a tray that included not just coffee, but cream, sugar, and what looked like expensive pastries from the French bakery downtown. "How did you know I like cream but no sugar?" Lily asked as she watched him prepare her cup exactly the way she preferred it. Something flickered across his face. Lucky guess. But it wasn't a guess, and they both knew it. Just like it wasn't a coincidence that the pastries included the lavender shortbread she'd been craving all morning, or that he seemed to know she was left-handed before she'd even reached for her portfolio. "Let's talk about the project," she said, needing to steer the conversation back to safe territory. For the next hour, Damon outlined what should have been a straightforward rebranding job for a chain of boutique hotels his company had recently acquired. But Lily found herself distracted by things that had nothing to do with design concepts or target demographics. The way he never quite turned his back to her, as if he was constantly aware of her position in the room. The way his nostrils would flare slightly when she leaned forward to show him her initial sketches. The way his pupils dilated when she accidentally brushed his hand while reaching for her coffee cup. And the questions. They started innocuous enough. Where was she from? How long had she been in Seattle? But gradually became more specific. Did she have family in the area? Had she ever spent time in rural communities? Had she ever experienced anything she couldn't explain? "I'm sorry," she finally said, setting down her cup with more force than necessary. "But what does my family history have to do with hotel branding?" Damon went very still, and for a moment she could swear she saw something wild flicker behind his eyes. "You're right. I apologize. I tend to be thorough when I'm considering long-term business relationships." Long-term. The word sent an unexpected thrill through her, which was ridiculous. This was about work, nothing more. "The portfolio samples you've shown me are impressive," he continued, his voice back to professional smoothness. "I'd like to offer you the contract with one condition. Which is, you work directly with me throughout the entire process. No delegating to project managers or design teams. Just us." The way he said, "just us," made her mouth go dry. "That's unusual for a project of this scope." "I have unusual requirements." She bet he did. Everything about Damon Blackwood was unusual, from his predatory grace to the way he seemed to look right through her skin to something underneath. "I'll need to think about it," she said, starting to gather her things. "Of course." He stood when she did, moving around the desk to walk her to the door. "But don't think too long, Lily. Opportunities like this have a way of disappearing." The words could have been a standard business negotiation tactic, but something in his tone made her shiver. She was hyper-aware of him walking behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell that intoxicating scent of bergamot, and something else, something wild and masculine that made her pulse race. At the elevator, he pressed the call button and stood close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Have dinner with me tonight." The words hung between them, and Lily felt the same dangerous pull she'd experienced 2 weeks ago on the street. Professional boundaries, she reminded herself. Client relationships. All the reasons this was a terrible idea. "I don't think that's appropriate, Mr. Blackwood." "Damon," he corrected, and the way he said his own name was like a caress. "And it's just dinner. We can discuss the project timeline." "I really should." The elevator doors opened, and Damon's hand settled on the small of her back to guide her inside. The touch was light, professional, but it sent heat racing up her spine. "Think about it," he said as the doors closed between them. Lily slumped against the elevator wall as soon as she was alone, her heart hammering. What was wrong with her? She'd just gotten out of an abusive relationship. The last thing she needed was to get involved with another man who clearly wasn't used to taking no for an answer. But even as she told herself that, she couldn't forget the way Damon had made Marcus retreat with nothing but a look. The way he'd held her like she was something precious rather than something to be controlled. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Enjoyed lunch with the boyfriend? You always did like them rich. Too bad money can't buy him protection. Marcus." Lily's hands shook as she deleted the message, but not before taking a screenshot. Maybe now she had enough for the police to take her seriously. The parking garage under her apartment building was dimly lit and mostly empty when she got home that evening. Lily had spent the rest of the day trying to focus on other projects, but Damon's offer kept circling through her mind like a persistent melody. She was digging through her purse for her keys when she heard footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. Slow, deliberate footsteps that were trying too hard to sound casual. "Hello, Lily." She spun around to find Marcus emerging from behind a concrete pillar, and her blood turned to ice. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a manic energy that hadn't been there before. "How did you get in here?" The parking garage required a key card to access. You'd be surprised how helpful building maintenance can be when you tell them you're trying to surprise your girlfriend. His smile made her skin crawl. "We need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about." Lily backed toward the elevator, her keys clutched in her fist like a weapon. "I want you to leave me alone, Marcus." "I mean it." "You don't mean that. You're just confused because of him." Marcus stepped closer, and she could smell alcohol on his breath. "Rich boy thinks he can just take what belongs to me, but I've got news for him. I don't belong to anyone. You belong to me." The facade of calm cracked, and Marcus grabbed her wrist with bruising force. 3 years, Lily. 3 years I invested in you, and you think you can just throw that away for some pretty boy with a trust fund. The familiar pain in her wrist where his fingers dug in brought back every terrible memory. Every moment she'd convinced herself his jealousy was love, his control was protection. Let go of me. Not until you listen. I believe the lady asked you to let go. The voice came from behind Marcus, low and deadly calm. Damon stepped out of the shadows between parked cars like some kind of dark angel, and the temperature in the garage seemed to drop 10 degrees. You, Marcus snarled, but his grip on Lily's wrist loosened slightly. Me. Damon moved closer, and there was something different about him now, something that made the hair on the back of Lily's neck stand up. His eyes seemed to glow in the fluorescent light, and when he smiled, she could swear she saw too many teeth. I thought I made myself clear the last time we met. You don't scare me, Marcus said, but he was backing away even as he spoke. I should. Damon's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but it carried clearly in the concrete space. Touch her again, and you'll discover just how creative I can be with problem-solving. There was something in his tone that went beyond normal human anger, something primal and terrifying that made Marcus release Lily's wrist entirely and take another step back. This isn't over, Marcus said, but he was already retreating toward the exit. Yes, Damon said, his golden eyes fixed on Marcus with predatory intensity. It is. Marcus practically ran for the exit, leaving Lily shaking in the middle of the parking garage. Only when the sound of his footsteps faded completely did Damon turn to her, and his expression transformed from terrifying to concerned in an instant. Are you hurt? Lily looked down at her wrist, which was already showing red marks that would probably be bruises by morning. I'm okay. But what are you doing here? Something guilty flickered across Damon's face. I was in the neighborhood. It was a lie, and they both knew it. The Blackwood building was downtown. Her apartment was in Fremont. There was no reason for him to be in the neighborhood unless he'd followed her. You were watching me. I was protecting you. The simple admission hung between them, and Lily didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. On one hand, if Damon hadn't been there, she wasn't sure what Marcus might have done. On the other hand, the idea that he'd been having her watched without her knowledge was almost as unsettling as Marcus's stalking. I can take care of myself. Can you? Damon stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes, the way his jaw was clenched with suppressed emotion. He's been watching you for weeks, Lily. Following you, learning your routines. That man is dangerous. And you're not. The question slipped out before she could stop it, but instead of being offended, Damon smiled. A real smile this time, not the predatory display he'd shown Marcus. Oh, I'm very dangerous, he said softly. But not to you. Never to you. The way he said it made her believe him, which was probably the most dangerous thing of all. I should go upstairs, she said, though she made no move toward the elevator. Have dinner with me. Damon. Not as a client. Not as a business arrangement. Just, let me feed you. Let me make sure you're safe. The vulnerability in his voice was her undoing. This powerful man who'd made Marcus flee in terror was asking, not demanding. And after the day she'd had, the thought of not being alone was more tempting than she wanted to admit. One dinner, she heard herself say. But somewhere public. His smile was blinding. Anywhere you want. As he walked her to the elevator, Lily caught herself stealing glances at his profile. There were still so many questions. How had he known to find her here? Why did Marcus seem genuinely afraid of him? And what was it about Damon that made her feel both safer and more endangered than she'd ever felt in her life? The elevator doors closed, and she caught their reflection in the polished metal, her looking small and fragile beside his tall, powerful frame. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel fragile. She felt protected, even if she wasn't entirely sure what she was being protected from. Or by whom. Chapter 3. The dinner had been perfect, too perfect. Lily stared at her laptop screen, cursor blinking in the Google search bar, as she tried to make sense of the evening she'd just shared with Damon Blackwood. The small Italian restaurant he'd chosen had been intimate without being presumptuous, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine. He'd been charming, attentive, asking about her work and her dreams with what seemed like genuine interest. But it was the little things that kept nagging at her. The way the sommelier had approached their table with a bottle of wine before Damon had even ordered, as if he'd known exactly what would be served. The way their server had seemed almost deferential, not just professionally courteous, but genuinely nervous. And most unsettling of all, the way Damon had known Marcus was lurking outside the restaurant a full 10 minutes before she'd even caught a glimpse of her ex through the window. "He's gone," Damon had said quietly, not even looking toward the street. "Victor took care of it." Victor. Another name without context. Another piece of a puzzle she was beginning to suspect was much larger than she'd imagined. She typed Damon Blackwood into the search bar and hit enter. The results were surprisingly sparse for a man who supposedly ran a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Business articles, press releases, a few society page photos from charity galas. But nothing personal. No college information, no family background, no interviews that revealed anything about the man behind the corporate facade. It was as if Damon Blackwood had simply materialized into existence 5 years ago when Blackwood Industries had burst onto the Seattle business scene with a series of aggressive acquisitions that had transformed the company from regional player to Pacific Northwest powerhouse. Lily frowned, scrolling through the search results. Even the photos seemed carefully curated, always shot from a distance at public events, never showing him clearly enough to make out fine details. In an age where everyone had a digital footprint dating back to their high school yearbook photos, Damon's online presence was eerily sanitized. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Sweet dreams, beautiful. Hope you enjoyed your date. Don't get too comfortable. Marcus." Lily deleted the message with shaking fingers, then screenshot the next 3 that came in rapid succession, each one more explicit in its threats than the last. She'd promised herself she'd go to the police in the morning, but looking at the vile words on her screen, she wondered if they'd take her seriously or just see another hysterical ex-girlfriend crying wolf. Her laptop chimed with an email notification. Work. A message from Damon's assistant about scheduling additional meetings for the hotel rebranding project. The timeline was aggressive, requiring several late-night sessions at Blackwood Industries to meet the deadline. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., Mr. Blackwood's office. He'll provide dinner. Another perfectly reasonable business communication that somehow felt loaded with hidden meaning. Lily closed her laptop and tried not to think about how the prospect of seeing Damon again made her pulse quicken despite every rational warning bell in her head. The Blackwood Industries building after hours was a different creature entirely. Gone were the bustling crowds of daytime workers, replaced by an almost oppressive quiet broken only by the hum of climate control systems and the distant ping of elevator bells. Security guards nodded respectfully as Lily signed in, but she noticed they all wore the same pin on their lapels, a stylized wolf's head that seemed oddly familiar. Damon's office was blazing with light when she arrived, and he looked up from his desk with a smile that made her forget her earlier unease. "You came." "It's a business meeting," she reminded him, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Of course it is." His smile turned predatory. "Are you hungry? I had Marcel prepare something special." The spread laid out on the conference table could have fed 6 people. Roasted lamb with rosemary, grilled vegetables, artisanal bread that was still warm from the oven. It was the kind of meal that spoke of careful planning and intimate knowledge of her preferences, knowledge he shouldn't have had. "This is too much," she said, genuinely overwhelmed. "Nothing is too much for you." The way he said it with such quiet conviction made her breath catch. This was dangerous territory, the kind of attention that Marcus had given her early in their relationship before it had twisted into something possessive and cruel. But Damon wasn't Marcus. When he pulled out her chair, his touch was gentle, respectful. When he served her wine, he didn't comment on how much she drank or lecture her about calories. And when she caught him watching her eat, there was something almost worshipful in his expression. "Tell me about your family," he said as they worked through the initial design concepts. "What about them? Are you close? Do they live nearby?" The same odd questions he'd asked during their first meeting, disguised as casual conversation, but somehow feeling like an interrogation. "My parents died when I was 15, she said, focusing on her laptop screen rather than his too perceptive golden eyes. "Car accident. I lived with my aunt in Portland until I turned 18, then moved here for college." "No siblings? Cousins? Why do you ask?" Damon was quiet for a long moment, and when she looked up, his expression was carefully neutral. "No reason. Just making conversation." But it wasn't just conversation, and they both knew it. Everything about Damon Blackwood felt calculated, from his perfectly tailored clothes to his seemingly casual questions about her background. They worked in relative quiet for the next 2 hours, and Lily found herself stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of physical training, his reflexes sharp and precise. When his pen ran out of ink, He'd caught a replacement that his assistant tossed from across the room without even looking up from his notes. No one had reflexes that good. "I need to make a call," Damon said around 10:30, glancing at his phone with a frown. "Business emergency. This might take a while. I can head home." "No." The word came out sharper than intended, and he softened his tone immediately. "Please. Stay. I'd feel better knowing you're safe here rather than driving home alone with Marcus still out there." The concern in his voice seemed genuine, but there was something else underneath it, something possessive that made her skin prickle with awareness. "I'll be right back," he said, moving toward a door she hadn't noticed before, apparently a private conference room connected to his office. "Feel free to help yourself to more wine." The door closed behind him with a soft click, but the office's acoustics were better than he'd probably intended. Lily could hear his voice through the wall, low and urgent, though she couldn't make out specific words at first. She tried to focus on her work, but curiosity got the better of her. Moving closer to the connecting door, she pressed her ear against the polished wood. "Told you to handle it quietly, Victor." Damon's voice was cold, carrying an authority that made her shiver. "I don't care what the council thinks about my choices. The human is under my protection." "Human?" The word hit her like a physical blow. Not Lily or she. The human. As if she were a different species entirely. "No, I will not reconsider." His voice was rising now, and there was something underneath it, something that didn't sound entirely human. A growl that seemed to vibrate through the walls. "She is mine, and anyone who threatens her will answer to me personally." Lily jerked back from the door, her heart hammering. The rational part of her mind tried to make sense of what she'd heard. Maybe it was just corporate speak, maybe human was some kind of business terminology she didn't understand. But the growl, that hadn't been human at all. "Your territory, your rules," came another voice through the door, though this one sounded like it was coming through a speakerphone. "But the pack is getting restless. They're saying you're compromised, that this obsession with a mortal will make you weak." Pack. Mortal. Territory. The words swirled in Lily's mind, each one more impossible than the last. She backed away from the door, her portfolio falling from nerveless fingers and scattering papers across the polished floor. "You forget yourself, Victor." Damon's voice was barely recognizable now, a low rumble that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. "I am Alpha King. My word is law. If the pack has concerns, they can bring them to me directly." "Alpha King." Lily dropped to her knees, frantically gathering the scattered design mock-ups, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the papers. She needed to get out of here. She needed to think, to process what she'd heard, to figure out if she was losing her mind or if. The conference room door opened. Lily looked up from her position on the floor and felt the world tilt sideways. Damon stood in the doorway, but he wasn't entirely Damon anymore. His eyes were blazing gold, not just flecked with color but actually glowing in the dim light. His canine teeth were longer, sharper, and his fingernails had become claws that left gouges in the doorframe where he gripped it. Most terrifying of all was his face itself, still recognizably him, but somehow more angular, more predatory. As if something wild was pressing against his human features from the inside, trying to break free. They stared at each other in absolute silence, predator and prey frozen in mutual shock. Then Damon's phone rang, the shrill sound shattering the moment. His appearance snapped back to normal so quickly that Lily wondered if she'd imagined the whole thing. Normal golden eyes, normal teeth, normal hands reaching for his phone. "Blackwood," he answered, his voice perfectly composed, but his eyes never left Lily's face. She scrambled to her feet, clutching her portfolio like a shield. "I have to go," she whispered. Damon held up one finger, mouthing wait, while he listened to whoever was on the other end of the call. But Lily couldn't wait. She couldn't stay in this room with this man, this thing, whatever he was. She ran. The elevator seemed to take forever to arrive, and she jabbed the lobby button repeatedly, certain that Damon would appear at any moment. But the doors closed without incident, and she slumped against the wall, trying to make sense of what she'd witnessed. Glowing eyes. Claws. That inhuman growl. None of it was possible. People didn't just transform into something else. It was the stress, the lack of sleep, the fear from Marcus's stalking. Her mind was playing tricks on her. But even as she told herself that, she couldn't forget the way Damon had looked at her in that doorway. Not surprised, not confused, but calculating. As if he was deciding what to do about the human who'd seen too much. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby, and Lily practically sprinted toward the exit. The security guards looked up as she passed, and she could swear she saw them reaching for their radios before the glass doors closed behind her. The parking garage was dimly lit and mostly empty, her footsteps echoing off the concrete walls as she made her way to her car. She was fumbling with her keys when she heard other footsteps, measured and purposeful. "Ms. Chun." The voice belonged to a man she'd never seen before, tall and lean with prematurely silver hair and pale eyes that seemed to see right through her. He wore an expensive suit similar to Damon's, but there was something colder about him, something that made every instinct scream danger. "I don't think we've been introduced," he continued, stepping closer. "Victor Kozlov. I work with Mr. Blackwood." Victor. The name from the phone call, the one who'd called her the human, like she was some kind of specimen. "I'm sorry, but I really need to go," Lily said, finally getting her key into the lock. "I'm sure you do." Victor's smile was all teeth. "It must be overwhelming, learning about our world like this. Most humans don't handle it well." There was that word again. Human. As if he was something else entirely. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." Victor moved closer, and Lily caught a whiff of something wild and dangerous, like the deep woods after rain. "But now that you do know, we have a problem. You see, our kind has rules about exposure. Very strict rules." Lily's hand found her car door handle, but before she could pull it open, Victor's hand closed over hers. His grip was gentle but immovable, and his skin was fever-hot against hers. "The pack is concerned," he said conversationally. "Our Alpha King has become distracted, compromised by his fascination with you. Some believe the kindest solution would be to remove the distraction entirely." The threat was delivered in the same tone he might have used to discuss the weather, but the menace underlying it was unmistakable. "Let go of me. Soon." Victor's pale eyes studied her face with scientific interest. "I'm trying to understand what he sees in you. You're pretty enough, I suppose, but hardly extraordinary. Yet he's willing to risk everything, his pack, his territory, his position as Alpha King. All for a fragile little human who could break with a single wrong word to the wrong person. I wouldn't. I don't even understand what any of this means." "Don't you?" Victor tilted his head, nostrils flaring slightly as if he was scenting the air around her. "I think you understand more than you're letting on. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Before Lily could respond, the parking garage filled with the sound of growling. Not one voice, but several, echoing off the concrete walls from multiple directions. Victor released her hand and stepped back, his expression shifting from predatory amusement to wary alertness. "Victor." Damon's voice cut through the growling like a blade. He emerged from behind a concrete pillar, no longer bothering to hide what he was. His eyes blazed gold in the dim light, and when he smiled, his elongated canines caught the fluorescent glare. "Alpha," Victor said, inclining his head in what might have been respect or mockery. "I was just having a conversation with your pet human. Were you?" Damon moved closer, and Lily could see other shapes moving in the shadows around them. More men in expensive suits, all with the same predatory grace, the same inhuman awareness. "And what did you discuss?" "Pack security. The risks of exposure. The usual concerns when mortals stumble into our world." "I see." Damon was close enough now that Lily could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell that intoxicating scent of bergamot and wildness that always seemed to surround him. "And what conclusions did you reach?" Victor's smile was razor-sharp. "That some problems solve themselves given time. Others require more direct intervention." The temperature in the garage seemed to drop 10 degrees. The men in the shadows stepped forward, and Lily realized she was surrounded by predators barely contained in human form. "The pack follows my orders, Victor," Damon said softly. "Not yours. If you have concerns about my leadership, you're welcome to challenge me directly." "Perhaps I will," Victor replied. "When the time is right." The two men stared at each other, and Lily could practically see the violence simmering between them. Whatever was happening here, she was caught in the middle of something much more dangerous than a corporate power struggle. "Go home, Victor," Damon said finally. "Take your concerns to the council if you must, but leave Lily out of this." "As you wish, Alpha." Victor gave that mocking half-bow again, then looked at Lily with cold calculation. "Ms. Chun, I do hope you'll think carefully about what you've learned tonight. For everyone's sake." He melted back into the shadows, and the other men followed. Within moments, the parking garage was empty except for Lily and Damon. "Get in your car," Damon said quietly, his appearance sliding back toward human normal. "Drive straight home. Lock your doors and don't open them for anyone." "What's happening? What are you?" "Later." His golden eyes met hers, and she could see genuine fear there, not for himself but for her. Right now, you need to get somewhere safe. Victor isn't the only one who sees you as a threat. A threat to what? Damon cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite everything she'd witnessed. To everything I've built. Everything I am. But I don't care, Lily. I'd burn it all down before I'd let anyone hurt you. The conviction in his voice made her believe him, which was possibly the most terrifying thing of all. Go, he said, stepping back. I'll have someone watching your building tonight. More of your pack. The word felt strange on her tongue. His smile was sad and dangerous. The one's loyal to me, yes. Lily got in her car with shaking hands, her mind reeling with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. As she drove out of the parking garage, she saw Damon in her rearview mirror, standing alone under the harsh fluorescent lights like some kind of dark guardian. Whatever he was, whatever this world was that she'd stumbled into, there was no going back now. She'd seen too much, learned too much. And somewhere in the shadows, Victor and others like him were deciding what to do about the human who knew their secrets. The human who was apparently under the protection of their alpha king. The human who was falling for a monster and couldn't bring herself to care. Chapter 4. Lily didn't sleep. She'd tried, God knew she'd tried, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw those blazing golden orbs, the elongated canines, the claws that had gouged deep furrows in expensive hardwood. She'd paced her apartment until dawn, jumping at every sound, her mind cycling between rational explanations and the impossible truth that kept pushing at the edges of her consciousness. By morning, she'd convinced herself it had been a trick of the light, stress-induced hallucinations, anything but the alternative. People didn't just transform into monsters. It wasn't possible. But when she opened her laptop to research sleep deprivation and visual hallucinations, she found herself typing werewolf into the search bar instead. The results were a mix of folklore, horror movies, and conspiracy theory websites that she would have dismissed as ridiculous just 24 hours ago. But now she found herself reading accounts from people who claimed to have witnessed supernatural creatures, stories that described golden eyes and inhuman strength and pack hierarchies. Pack. Alpha King. The same terms she'd heard through Damon's office door. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Please. She didn't need to ask who it was. Even through digital communication, she could feel Damon's presence like a physical weight. I can't do this right now, she typed back. Lily, please. Let me explain. Explain what? That you're some kind of monster? That everything between us has been a lie. The response came immediately. Nothing between us is a lie. Meet me tonight. I'll tell you everything. No. Then I'm coming to you. The simple statement sent a chill down her spine. She believed him. He would come to her apartment, and after last night she wasn't sure locked doors would stop him. Fine. The park on Pine Street. 8 p.m. Public place. Thank you. Lily threw her phone across the room and immediately regretted it when she heard the screen crack against the wall. She was falling apart, and she couldn't afford to fall apart. Not when her entire understanding of reality was crumbling around her. She called in sick to her other freelance clients and spent the day researching everything she could find about werewolves, shapeshifters, and supernatural creatures. Most of it was obvious fiction, but buried in the folklore and fantasy were threads of consistency that made her stomach churn. Pack hierarchies, territorial behavior, mate bonds. That last one made her slam the laptop shut. She couldn't think about that, couldn't process the implications of what Damon had said to Victor in the parking garage. She is mine. Pine Street Park was busy enough to feel safe, but quiet enough for private conversation. Lily arrived early, choosing a bench under a streetlight where she could see anyone approaching. Her hands shook as she checked her phone. Still 10 minutes until 8. She'd dressed carefully, choosing jeans and a sweater that made her feel less vulnerable than the professional clothes she'd worn to their business meetings. As if casual clothes could somehow armor her against whatever truth was coming. Lily. She spun around to find Damon emerging from the shadows between the trees. He looked perfectly human in the lamplight, no glowing eyes, no visible claws, but now that she knew what to look for, she could see the predatory grace in how he moved, the way his gaze swept the park like he was cataloging potential threats. You came, he said, relief evident in his voice. I said I would. She stayed on her feet, ready to run if necessary. Start talking. Damon moved closer, and she could see the exhaustion in his face, the lines of strain around his eyes. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. Find out what, exactly? That you're completely insane? That you think you can turn into an animal. I don't think it, Lily. I am it. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could smell that intoxicating scent of bergamot and wildness. I'm a werewolf, the alpha king of the Pacific Northwest pack. The words hung in the evening air, and Lily felt something hysterical bubble up in her chest. You're serious. You actually believe that. I know how it sounds. It sounds like you need professional help. Psychiatric help. She backed away from him, her heart breaking. God, Damon, I felt something with you. Something real. But you're sick and I can't. Watch me. The quiet command stopped her retreat. Damon's eyes met hers and she saw pain there and determination and something that looked like love. If I show you, if you see what I really am, will you listen? Will you let me explain? Every rational part of her mind screamed at her to run, to call for help, to get as far away as possible from this man who believed he could transform into a monster. But there was another part buried deep that whispered about all the impossible things she'd already witnessed. His inhuman speed, his golden eyes in the dim light, the way Marcus had fled from him in terror. Show me what? She whispered. Damon stepped back, giving himself space, and began unbuttoning his shirt. What I am. What we are. We. The pack. My kind. His shirt hit the ground, revealing a chest and arms corded with lean muscle. The world you've stumbled into whether either of us wanted it or not. Lily watched in fascination and growing terror as he kicked off his shoes, his movements economical and practiced. This was clearly a routine he'd performed countless times before. Damon, stop. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He met her eyes, and she could swear they were already starting to glow. Because after tonight, you'll either accept me for what I am or you'll run. And I need to know which it's going to be. The change began slowly. His spine straightened, elongated, and she could hear the soft pops and cracks of bones reshaping themselves. His fingernails darkened and extended into claws, and when he smiled at her, his canines were already longer, sharper. This is impossible, Lily breathed, but she couldn't look away. Is it? Damon's voice was deeper now, rougher, with that inhuman growl she'd heard through his office door. Haven't you felt it, Lily? The connection between us? The way your body responds to mine before your mind can catch up. She had. From the moment she'd pressed herself against his chest outside the coffee shop, she'd felt something electric and inexplicable drawing her to him. The transformation accelerated. Damon dropped to his hands and knees as his human features melted and reformed into something beautiful and terrifying. His nose elongated into a muzzle, his ears shifted and pointed, and dark fur sprouted along his arms and back. Within moments, where Damon Blackwood had stood, there was now a wolf the size of a small pony. Its coat was midnight black with silver markings, and its eyes, those eyes were still pure molten gold, still unmistakably his. Lily stumbled backward, her legs hitting the park bench hard enough to bruise. This isn't real. This isn't possible. The wolf, Damon, took a careful step toward her, moving with the same controlled grace she'd come to associate with his human form. When she didn't flee, he moved closer, until he was near enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his massive body. Up close, he was magnificent. His coat gleamed in the streetlight, and she could see intelligence in those golden eyes, recognition, and something that might have been hope. Damon, she whispered. The wolf's ears pricked forward at the sound of his name, and he made a soft whining sound deep in his throat. Slowly, carefully, he lowered his head until it was within reach. Lily stared at him for a long moment, her world tilting on its axis. Everything she'd thought she knew about reality was crumbling around her. But there was no denying what she was seeing. No rational explanation that could account for the man who had become a wolf before her eyes. With shaking fingers, she reached out and touched the side of his muzzle. His fur was softer than she'd expected, warm and thick, and at her touch, he closed his eyes and made that whining sound again. You're real, she said, wonder and terror warring in her voice. This is real. The wolf, Damon, stepped back and began to shift again. The process was faster in reverse, his lupin features melting back into human form until he was kneeling naked on the grass before her. Are you okay? He asked, and his voice was gentle, concerned, entirely human again. Lily laughed, the sound cracking with hysteria. Am I okay? I just watched a man turn into a wolf. No, Damon, I'm not okay. I'm pretty sure I'm having a complete mental breakdown. He reached for his discarded clothes, pulling on his shirt with practiced efficiency. You're not having a breakdown. Your world just got a lot bigger, that's all. A lot bigger. She sat down heavily on the bench, her legs no longer able to support her weight. Werewolves are real. You're a werewolf. The Alpha King, whatever that means. It means I'm the leader of all the werewolf packs in this territory. The Pacific Northwest from Alaska to Northern California. Damon sat beside her on the bench, close enough that she could feel his body heat, but not touching. It means I'm responsible for keeping our secret, protecting our people, maintaining the balance between our world and the human world. The human world. Lily looked at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. That's what I am to you. Human. Other. No. The vehemence in his voice startled her. That's what you are to Victor, to the pack members who don't understand. To me you're... He trailed off, running a hand through his dark hair. I'm what? My mate. The words hung between them, heavy with implications she wasn't ready to process. I don't understand what that means. Damon turned to face her fully, his golden eyes serious in the lamplight. In werewolf culture, we don't fall in love the way humans do. We find our mates, the one person whose soul calls to ours, whose scent drives us wild, who completes us in ways we didn't even know we were incomplete. That's... She searched for words. That's crazy. Is it? Haven't you felt it too? The pull between us? The way your body responds to mine before your mind can catch up. She had. From that first moment outside the coffee shop, she'd felt drawn to him in ways that defied logic. But hearing it explained in supernatural terms made her feel trapped, manipulated. So I don't have a choice? She asked. This mate bond thing, it's like supernatural date rape? I'm just supposed to fall in line because biology says so. No. Damon's response was immediate and fierce. The mate bond creates the potential for love, not the compulsion for it. You always have a choice, Lily. Always. I would never force you into anything. But you want me to accept this. To accept you. I want you to know the truth. All of it. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and she could see vulnerability in the line of his shoulders. I want you to understand that what I feel for you isn't some supernatural compulsion. It's real. Maybe the mate bond brought us together, but everything since then, every conversation, every moment we've shared, that's been choice. Yours and mine. Lily stared at him, this man who could transform into a wolf, who commanded a secret world she'd never known existed, who claimed she was his destined mate. I need time, she said finally. I need to think. I understand. Do you? Because I don't think you do. She stood up, pacing away from the bench. My entire understanding of reality just imploded. Everything I thought I knew about the world, about you, about myself, none of it's true anymore. And you're sitting there asking me to just accept that I'm your supernatural soulmate and move on with our relationship like this is normal. It's not normal, Damon said quietly. None of this is normal. But it's real and it's what we're dealing with. What we're dealing with. She laughed bitterly. We. There's no we in this, Damon. You've been lying to me since the moment we met. I've been protecting you. By lying. By pretending to be human, by letting me think I was losing my mind when I noticed things that didn't add up. She spun to face him, fury and hurt warring in her chest. Do you have any idea what that did to me? After Marcus, after 3 years of him making me question my own perceptions, my own sanity, and then you did the same thing. Damon's face went white. Lily, I never meant. But you did. You made me doubt myself, made me think I was imagining things, and all along you knew exactly what was happening. Tears burned her eyes, and she wiped them away angrily. I can't do this. I can't be with someone who lies to me, no matter what cosmic forces are supposedly pulling us together. Please. Damon stood, and she could see desperation in his golden eyes. Don't let him win. Don't let Marcus's abuse poison what we could have. This isn't about Marcus. This is about you, about trust, about the fact that everything between us has been built on deception. Not everything. Enough. She backed toward the park entrance, her heart breaking with every step. I need space, Damon. I need time to think, and I need you to respect that. Where will you go? The concern in his voice almost undid her resolve. That's not your business anymore. She turned and walked away, and to his credit, he didn't follow. But she could feel his eyes on her back as she left the park, could sense his presence like a physical weight even after she turned the corner and disappeared from sight. Emma's apartment was a sanctuary of normalcy, overstuffed furniture, abstract art on the walls, the lingering scent of vanilla candles. Lily had called her best friend from the taxi, managing only, I need somewhere to stay tonight, before her voice cracked completely. Now she sat curled on Emma's couch, wrapped in a borrowed robe and clutching a mug of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. trying to find words to explain the unexplainable. "So let me get this straight," Emma said, perched on the coffee table facing her. "Damon Blackwood, billionaire CEO Damon Blackwood, told you he's a werewolf. He didn't just tell me. He showed me. Showed you how?" Lily set down her mug with shaking hands. "He transformed Em. Right in front of me. 1 minute he was a man, the next he was this huge wolf with golden eyes." Emma studied her face with the concerned expression she'd worn since opening her door to find Lily in tears. "Honey, I know you've been under a lot of stress lately. Marcus stalking you, the pressure of landing such a big client. You think I'm having a breakdown. I think you're dealing with more than any person should have to handle, and sometimes our minds play tricks on us when we're overwhelmed." Lily had expected this reaction, had known that no rational person would believe her story. But hearing it from Emma, her closest friend, made something cold settle in her chest. "I know how it sounds," she said quietly. "But it's real, Em. He's real. Werewolves exist, and I've somehow gotten tangled up with their king." Emma reached over and squeezed her hand. "Okay, let's say, hypothetically, that werewolves exist. What does that mean for you?" "It means I'm in love with a monster." The admission slipped out before she could stop it, and Emma's eyes widened. "Are you?" "I don't know. Maybe. I felt something with him that I've never felt before, but now I don't know if it was real or just some supernatural manipulation." "What did he say about that?" "He claims the mate bond only creates potential, that everything else is choice. But how can I trust anything he says? He's been lying to me from the beginning." Emma was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was carefully neutral. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. I need time to think, to process all of this. Can I stay here for a few days?" "Of course." Emma squeezed her hand again. "Stay as long as you need." Marcus crouched in the bushes at the edge of Pine Street Park, his hands shaking as he replayed the footage on his phone for the dozenth time. The video quality wasn't great, shot from a distance in dim light, but it was clear enough to show Damon Blackwood removing his clothes and then changing. He'd followed Lily to the park, planning to confront her about her rich boyfriend, maybe scare her a little. But what he'd witnessed instead had turned his world upside down. Werewolves were real. Shapeshifters existed. And he had video proof. Marcus scrolled through the search results on his phone, finding exactly what he'd hoped to find. Forums dedicated to cryptozoology, collectors who paid enormous sums for authentic supernatural artifacts, researchers who would kill for this kind of evidence. The video alone was worth a fortune, but Marcus knew it could be dismissed as clever CGI. He needed more proof, more evidence of what Blackwood really was. He needed to get closer. A plan was already forming in his mind. If Lily was involved with monsters, then she was in danger. Real danger that even the police would have to take seriously once he showed them the proof. And if he happened to make some money exposing the supernatural world in the process, well, that was just justice. Lily had chosen some rich freak over him, had humiliated him, had made him look weak. But monsters weren't protected by restraining orders or corporate security teams. Monsters could be hunted. Marcus smiled as he uploaded the video to an encrypted cloud server, then began researching everything he could find about werewolf weaknesses and supernatural hunting techniques. Lily thought she was safe with her monster boyfriend. She had no idea what was coming for both of them. But she would learn soon enough that some predators hunted other predators. And Marcus had always been very good at hunting. Chapter 5. 3 days of hiding at Emma's apartment had done nothing to quiet the chaos in Lily's mind. If anything, the forced solitude had given her too much time to think, to replay every moment with Damon, to question everything she thought she knew about reality. She was curled on Emma's couch, laptop balanced on her knees, pretending to work on other design projects while actually researching werewolf folklore for the 100th time, when Emma's phone rang. "Emma Reyes," her friend answered, switching immediately into her professional voice. As a trauma nurse at Seattle General, Emma was used to emergency calls at all hours. Lily watched her friend's face change from calm professionalism to growing alarm. "What do you mean chemical spill? What kind of chemicals?" Emma was already reaching for her coat. "No, I understand the evacuation protocols, but I need to know." "Yes, I'll be there in 20 minutes. "What's wrong?" Lily asked as Emma hung up. "Emergency at the hospital. Some kind of chemical leak in the East Wing. They're calling in all off-duty staff to help with patient evacuations." Emma was pulling on her shoes, her movements sharp with anxiety. "I'm sorry to leave you like this, but I'm coming with you." "Lily, no. It's dangerous and you don't have any medical training." I can help. I can carry supplies, move equipment, whatever you need. The truth was, she couldn't stand another minute of sitting alone with her thoughts. She needed to do something, to feel useful, to focus on someone else's crisis instead of her own shattered world. Emma hesitated, clearly torn between professional duty and concern for her friend. Please, Lily said. I need this. Fine. But you do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you. No heroics, no wandering off. Emergency situations are unpredictable, and I can't worry about keeping track of you on top of everything else. They made the drive to Seattle General in tense silence, Emma's knuckles white on the steering wheel as she navigated through increasingly heavy traffic. As they approached the hospital, Lily could see emergency vehicles lining the street, fire trucks, ambulances, hazmat teams in protective suits. This is bigger than they made it sound on the phone, Emma muttered, pulling into the staff parking lot. The scene outside the hospital was controlled chaos. Medical staff in scrubs moved with practiced efficiency, wheeling patients out on gurneys and loading them into waiting ambulances. The east wing of the building was cordoned off with yellow tape, and men in hazmat suits were setting up what looked like decontamination stations. Emma, a doctor Lily didn't recognize, jogged over to them. Thank God you're here. We need all hands for the evacuations. What happened exactly? Emma asked, pulling on a pair of latex gloves. Chemical storage accident in the basement. Some kind of botanical research compound. The fumes are filling the ventilation system. Not immediately lethal, but prolonged exposure could cause respiratory distress and neurological symptoms. Botanical research compound. Something cold settled in Lily's stomach, though she couldn't say why. What do you need me to do? Emma asked. ICU patients first, they're the most vulnerable. We're moving them to the temporary treatment center across the street. Emma turned to Lily. Stay close, follow my lead, and if I tell you to get out, you run. No questions. For the next 2 hours, Lily threw herself into the evacuation effort. She helped wheel gurneys, carried medical supplies, and did whatever the nurses asked without question. The work was exhausting but oddly cathartic. For the first time in days, she wasn't thinking about werewolves or mate bonds or the impossible choice she'd been avoiding. She was helping Emma transfer an elderly patient when she noticed the smell. It was subtle at first, barely detectable under the typical hospital odors of antiseptic and floor wax. But as they moved deeper into the building to clear the last few rooms, it grew stronger. A floral scent that was simultaneously sweet and bitter, familiar and alien. Do you smell that? She asked Emma. Smell what? All I smell is whatever chemical they spilled. Emma's voice was slightly muffled by the surgical mask she'd put on as a precaution. But Lily didn't have a mask, and the scent was growing stronger with every breath. It made her head feel strange, light and disconnected, and there was something about it that triggered a deep, instinctual unease. They were wheeling their patient toward the exit when Lily saw him. Marcus stood near the main entrance, wearing a visitor's badge and talking intently to a man in a hazmat suit. Even from a distance, she could see the satisfied expression on his face, the way he kept checking his phone like he was waiting for something. Emma, she said, grabbing her friend's arm. We need to get out of here. Now. What? Why? Before Lily could answer, her own phone buzzed with an incoming call. Damon's name flashed on the screen, and without thinking, she answered. Lily, where are you? His voice was sharp with urgency. Seattle General. There was an emergency. Get out. Now. Whatever emergency brought you there, it's not real. What do you mean it's not real? I'm looking at dozens of patients being evacuated. It's a trap. Marcus set this up, and you need to get out before. The line went dead. Lily stared at her phone, then looked around the hospital lobby with new eyes. The patients were real, the medical staff was real, but something felt wrong about the whole situation. The hazmat team members didn't move like emergency responders. They were too calm, too organized, like they were following a script rather than reacting to a crisis. And Marcus. Marcus was here, watching, waiting. Emma, we have to go, she said, pulling on her friend's arm. I can't leave. There are still patients. Something's wrong. This isn't what it seems. Emma stared at her. Lily, honey, I know you've been under a lot of stress, but you can't just... Please. Lily's voice cracked with desperation. Trust me. We need to leave right now. Before Emma could respond, a commotion erupted near the main entrance. Security guards were shouting, people were pointing, and through the chaos, Lily saw a familiar figure striding through the glass doors like an avenging angel. Damon. He moved through the crowd with predatory grace, his golden eyes scanning the area until they found her. Even from across the lobby, she could see something was wrong with him. His face was flushed, his breathing labored, and there was a wildness in his expression that sent alarm bells ringing in her head. "Lily!" He started toward her, but after only a few steps he stumbled, pressing a hand to his chest. That was when she realized what the floral scent was, why it had triggered such deep unease. She'd read about it during her frantic research into werewolf lore, had dismissed it as folklore and superstition. "Wolfsbane. Oh God," she breathed. "Damon, don't come any closer." But he was already fighting his way through the crowd, his control visibly slipping with every breath of the contaminated air. She could see sweat beading on his forehead, could see his hands starting to shake. "Everyone needs to evacuate immediately," one of the hazmat team members announced over a bullhorn. "The contamination levels are increasing." But instead of moving toward the exits, people were pulling out phones, pointing them at Damon as he staggered through the lobby. Someone shouted, "Is he having a seizure?" And suddenly there were cameras everywhere, emergency responders closing in, security guards trying to maintain order. Marcus appeared beside her as if from nowhere, his smile cold and triumphant. "Quite a show, isn't it?" he said conversationally. "Your boyfriend's about to become very famous. You did this. It wasn't a question. I did what was necessary. You chose a monster over me, Lily. Over a normal, human relationship. But don't worry, soon everyone will see what he really is." Across the lobby, Damon dropped to his knees, his body convulsing. Even from a distance, Lily could see his features beginning to shift, his human facade cracking under the wolfsbane's influence. "Stop this," she said, grabbing Marcus's arm. "Whatever you've done, undo it. I can't stop it now even if I wanted to. Which I don't." Marcus shook her off. "In about 5 minutes, your precious Damon is going to transform into a wolf in front of 50 witnesses and a dozen security cameras. The footage will be uploaded to every news outlet and social media platform in the world before the supernatural cleanup crews can even respond." "Why? What do you get out of exposing him?" "Justice. Recognition. And enough money to disappear somewhere your monster friends can't find me." Marcus's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. "Turns out there are people who pay very well for proof that supernatural creatures exist. Professional hunters who've been waiting for evidence like this for decades." Lily's blood ran cold. "Hunters? Oh yes. They're very interested in your boyfriend and his pack. Especially after I told them about the territorial structure, the pack hierarchy, the weaknesses I've observed." Marcus leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Did you know werewolves become almost human when they're separated from their pack for extended periods? Weaker, more vulnerable? You're insane. I'm practical. And I'm patient. I've been watching, learning, gathering intelligence for weeks. This hospital trap was just the opening move." Across the lobby, Damon let out a sound that was half human scream, half animal howl. His shirt was splitting along the seams as his body began to change, and the crowd of onlookers pressed closer, their phones capturing every moment. Lily looked around desperately, searching for a way to help him, to stop this disaster before it destroyed not just Damon, but potentially every werewolf in existence. If the supernatural world was exposed like this, violently and publicly, the consequences would be catastrophic. That was when she saw Victor. He stood near the emergency exit, his pale eyes fixed on Damon with cold calculation rather than concern. As she watched, he pulled out his phone and made a call, his lips moving in urgent conversation. "The pack," she realized. "They're here." "Of course they are," Marcus said. "I was counting on it. The more monsters that show up to rescue their precious Alpha King, the more evidence I collect." But Victor wasn't here to rescue anyone. Even from across the room, Lily could read the satisfaction in his expression, the way he seemed to be coordinating rather than responding to the crisis. He wanted this to happen. Wanted Damon exposed, humiliated, destroyed. A memory surfaced, Victor's words in the parking garage. "Some problems solve themselves given time. Others require more direct intervention." "He planned this too," she said, the pieces clicking into place. "Victor. He's working with you." Marcus's smile widened. "He's working with my associates. Turns out your boyfriend has enemies in his own pack. Enemies who think a weak alpha obsessed with a human mate is bad for business." Emma appeared at her side, having finally fought her way through the crowd. "Lily, what's happening?" "That man, he looks like he's having a seizure," Lily said quickly. "We need to help him." But even as she said it, she knew there was no medical intervention that could help Damon now. The wolfsbane was forcing the change, and in minutes he would shift completely in front of dozens of witnesses. Unless she did something to stop it. "Emma, I need you to pull the fire alarm," she said. "What? Why?" "Just trust me. Pull the alarm, then get everyone out of the building. Clear the whole area. I can't just..." "Please." Lily grabbed her friend's shoulders, looking directly into her eyes. "I can't explain everything right now, but that man's life depends on getting these people out of here. All of their lives depend on it." Emma stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but what are you going to do?" "Something stupid," Lily admitted. As Emma pushed through the crowd toward the nearest fire alarm, Lily started moving toward Damon. Marcus caught her arm, his grip painful. "Where do you think you're going?" "To help him. You'll ruin everything. The plan only works if..." Lily drove her elbow into Marcus's solar plexus. The self-defense move Emma had taught her after the first time he'd grabbed her. He doubled over, gasping, and she broke free. The fire alarm started blaring, its shrill sound cutting through the chaos. Emergency lights began flashing, and the crowd started moving toward the exits, though many people were still recording with their phones. Lily fought her way through the evacuation, pushing against the tide of people fleeing the building. Damon was almost completely transformed now, his human clothes hanging in tatters as his body took on its lupin shape. She dropped to her knees beside him just as the change completed, and found herself face to face with the massive black wolf she'd seen in the park. But this time, there was no recognition in those golden eyes, no intelligence. Only wild, panicked confusion. The wolfsbane hadn't just forced the shift, it had stripped away his human consciousness, leaving only the wolf. "Damon," she whispered, reaching out slowly. "It's me. It's Lily." The wolf's ears flicked toward her voice, and for a moment she saw a glimmer of recognition. But then Victor's voice cut through the chaos. "Stand down, Alpha. You're no longer fit to lead." Lily looked up to see Victor approaching, flanked by two other men in expensive suits. They moved with the same predatory grace as Damon, but there was nothing protective about their posture. They were hunters closing in on wounded prey. "The Pack Council has voted," Victor continued, his voice carrying clearly despite the alarm. "Your obsession with this human has compromised our security and exposed our world. I hereby challenge your right to lead." The wolf, Damon, snarled, his hackles rising. But the wolfsbane was still affecting him, making his movements clumsy and uncoordinated. "This is perfect," Marcus said from behind Lily. He was still recording, his phone capturing everything. "A werewolf power struggle caught on camera. My buyers are going to love this." But Lily was no longer listening to Marcus. All her attention was focused on Damon, on the wild confusion in his golden eyes, on the way his body trembled with the effort of fighting the wolfsbane's effects. She thought about everything he'd told her, about the mate bond, about choice, about the difference between supernatural compulsion and real love. She thought about his gentleness, his protection, the way he'd looked at her like she was precious rather than property. And she made her choice. "Damon," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm here. Come back to me." She reached out and placed both hands on the wolf's massive head, ignoring the gasps from the few remaining onlookers, ignoring Marcus's triumphant laughter, ignoring Victor's snarl of rage. "Come back," she whispered. "Choose to come back." For a moment nothing happened. Then the wolf's breathing began to slow, his trembling ceased, and those golden eyes focused on her face with growing clarity. The shift began again, but this time it was controlled, deliberate. Human features emerged from lupin ones, and within moments, Damon knelt before her in human form, naked and gasping but undeniably himself. "Lily," he breathed. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe." "I know." She stripped off her jacket and wrapped it around his shoulders. "But I couldn't let you face this alone." Around them, the hospital was finally clearing, the fire alarm having driven most of the witnesses away. But Marcus was still there, still recording, and Victor and his allies were closing in. "Touching," Victor said coldly. "But ultimately irrelevant. The damage is done, Alpha. Your little display here has compromised everything we've worked to protect." "Has it?" Damon rose slowly to his feet, Lily's jacket barely preserving his modesty. But there was something different about his posture now, something that made Victor take an involuntary step back. "Because I count exactly 3 witnesses with recording devices, and I know where all of them are." His golden eyes fixed on Marcus with predatory intensity. "You made one critical error in your plan. You assumed I'd be alone when I came for her." That was when Lily heard them, footsteps echoing through the emptying hospital, moving with coordinated precision. She turned to see men and women in dark clothing emerging from stairwells and side corridors, surrounding Victor's group and cutting off Marcus's escape routes. "The pack," Damon said quietly. "The loyal members, anyway. They've been in position since Victor first made his challenge." "You knew," Victor snarled. "You knew about the trap." "I suspected. You've never been as clever as you think you are, Victor." Damon's voice was calm, but Lily could see the fury burning in his eyes. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice my own beta coordinating with supernatural hunters? That I wouldn't have you watched after your little parking garage threat?" Victor's face went pale. "The Council will never accept a compromised alpha. Your obsession with this human is my choice to make," Damon finished. "Just as it was your choice to betray your pack, your species, and everything we stand for." The showdown between them was interrupted by Marcus's voice, high and panicked. "You can't do this. I have rights. This is America, and you can't just make you disappear," one of the pack members suggested helpfully. "You'd be surprised what we can do." "The footage," Marcus said desperately. "I've already uploaded it to the cloud. Even if you kill me, the evidence will still show a man having what appears to be a medical emergency in a hospital," Damon said calmly. "Technology is a wonderful thing, Marcus. Video manipulation has become so sophisticated that no one trusts anything they see online anymore. But I saw a man collapse during a chemical emergency. Nothing more." Damon's smile was all teeth. "Amazing how memory becomes unreliable during traumatic events." Lily looked around the nearly empty hospital lobby, understanding dawning. The remaining witnesses were all pack members or hospital staff who would be quietly debriefed. The security cameras had probably been compromised before the first emergency call was made. And Marcus's footage, damning as it might appear, would be dismissed as an elaborate hoax in a world where special effects could create anything. "You planned this," she said, looking at Damon with new respect. "The whole thing. You knew it was a trap, but you came anyway." "I came for you," he said simply. "Everything else was just contingency planning." Victor made a sound of disgust. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You risked everything. The secrecy we've maintained for centuries, the safety of every werewolf in North America, for one human." "I risked everything for my mate," Damon corrected. "And I'd do it again." The words hit Lily like a physical blow. After everything she'd said to him in the park, after walking away and staying away for 3 days, he'd still come for her. Had still put her life above his own safety, above the supernatural world's most sacred law. "You could have been exposed," she whispered. "You could have destroyed everything." "Nothing else matters if I lose you," he said, his golden eyes meeting hers. "I told you that before. I meant it." The raw honesty in his voice, the vulnerability beneath his alpha dominance, broke something open in her chest. All her fears, all her rational objections, all the walls she'd built to protect herself crumbled in the face of that simple truth. He'd chosen her, not because of supernatural compulsion or mate bond destiny, but because he loved her enough to risk everything for her safety. "I'm sorry," she said, tears burning her eyes. "I'm sorry I ran, I'm sorry I didn't trust. You had every right to run." Damon moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I should have trusted you to handle it. Would you have? If this hadn't happened, would you have ever told me?" He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. "I don't know. I wanted to, but I was terrified of losing you. Of you looking at me the way you're looking at me right now." "How am I looking at you?" "Like I'm a monster." Lily stared at him, seeing past the supernatural strength and predatory grace to the man underneath. The man who'd saved her from Marcus, who'd protected her, who'd just risked everything he'd built for her safety. "You're not a monster," she said quietly. "You're mine." The words hung between them, and she saw something fierce and protective flare in his golden eyes. "Does that mean?" "It means I choose you too," she said. "All of you. Human, wolf, alpha, king. I choose all of it." Damon's smile was blinding, and he reached for her just as Victor's snarl cut through the moment. "Enough. This ends now." But before Victor could make his move, the pack members surrounding him stepped forward, their loyalty clear in their coordinated response. "No," Damon said quietly. "This begins now." Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like, and share this video to be the first to get notified when the part 2 of this story drops.